Look right at this, okay? Stare right up at this thing. Not the lens, but my hand. Very still. You have hiding places? Are they? Back here? Mm-hmm.
See a path for me?
A path?
Uh-huh.
Can you just show it to me for 1 second? I just want to see it.
This is Alec Soth. Yeah, so I'm a photographer. The project I'm doing deals with the subject of retreating from the world. That can involve everything from hermits to monks. It's something in the culture right now, sort of in preparation for the decline of the American Empire, in a way.
That's my home sweet home.
You want to hear my story?
Yeah, let's hear it.
From start to finish. I don't believe we're a democracy anymore. I think we've lost that.
I've been living out here in the desert in these rocks now for 27 years.
But part of it is the fantasy of having a retreat. It's not really about running away, it's about the desire to run away.
Seeing the film again made me realise that it's almost like another character in the film. And you obviously didn't choose the easy route. And you're, it's quite cumbersome, you're carrying it over quite rough terrain. I just wanted to ask about your choice of tool.
Let's see, how do I answer that? I mean, that particular camera I had started using probably 10 years before, and it's really not that cumbersome. I mean, it's it's a bit bigger than a regular camera, but like compared to these people making a movie and dealing with sound and all that, so I think more is made of that. It is really expensive, so there's that part. But there is the big benefit of it is the process, the slowing down of the process, and the way it allows you to like set the camera aside and talk to people, and have this other kind of interaction. And then what you don't really get to experience at all through the film is the look as you look on the ground glass. It's so crisp and detailed, and I love this element of, it's kind of related to the film in funny ways, this like masking of yourself. You get to hide while you're composing the picture. I really like that part.
Yeah, and I guess hiding is a big part of the project. The people who...
Yeah, but it's such bullshit because it's like a film crew following me around. I'm like sitting here and it's bright lights, and I had the sense, I have to say that because we did this workshop today, so I've been yapping all day long, and I'm the sound of my own voice, and I have to look at myself, and it's like, yeah, it's about running away, right? Such a fraud.
Well, in the film...
Yeah, sorry. No, yes. Sorry, I had a slight meltdown.
Yeah, it must be kind of weird. But in the film, you you talk about the idea of escape, you know. And so that must have been part of the motivation for starting on a project like this, was...
Yeah, it's this, I mean, it's the mutual, and that there is this inherent contradiction in the whole thing, which I kind of repeat in the movie, which I'm happy that I repeat, that it's the fantasy of running away. But it's a simultaneous desire to run away and to be acknowledged. And that's what I found, you know, this question is how do you find these people? And of course, they haven't really run away. They're available. I mean, the guy who I'm talking to about wanting to buy a cave, and he keeps talking about realtor.com, he's online. He's not really running away. And so often these people are, you know, welcome. So it's this mutual desire to be a part. I mean, I had this feeling tonight, like I would like to leave right now and go away. But of course, I also, you know, it's also nice to be acknowledged. So it's a contradictory impulse.
There's also something I did find watching the film as well, that something that's maybe a bit contradictory as well, is that the people, they do seem to still be quite informed. You know, they talk about politics, and there's definitely a political backdrop, I think, to the film and the book manual as well. So was that a part of it too, or did that just come naturally?
Yeah, you know, so one thing about the film, they started filming about halfway through the process. So, you know, a couple of people we revisit, people that I'd photographed before, and the full backstory is that this all started from a pretty random commission from a museum to photograph in the South. And it was while I was there that I remembered the story of Eric Rudolph, who was the Olympic bomber when the Olympics were in Atlanta. And he had bombed, you know, for political reasons. And that was the backdrop. And I went to explore where he had hid out for years. And it was during that investigation that I stumbled upon this small hermitage, these Greek Orthodox hermits. And I started thinking about the array of reasons for running away. So sometimes it's political, sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's financial. And so that political part is in the background, but it could be right or left, or, you know, it takes on different forms, yeah.
There's also another word that comes up again and again when I've been looking at your work, and that's nostalgia. I'm just wondering what you think about that. I mean, is that a fair description of what your work is about? You're obviously, you know, you've done several photo books, and some of them have been put together, you know, years after you've taken the photographs. Do you like to look back? Do you like to reflect?
No, you know, it's funny. I'm not a very backwards looking person. I have an incredibly bad memory, in fact, and I don't recount stories in the past very often. But I do think, you know, nostalgia is sort of, that word is kind of like tethered to photography, because photography is all about, you know, stopping time. And it's just automatically linked to this desire, you know, to hold on to the past or something. And which is why it often runs up against nostalgia. And of course, nostalgia is sort of a negative term, and like suggest something, shallow, and I'm wary of that, but at the same time, I play with it, and there's no doubt that there's a romantic quality to what I do.
Cool. Well, let's see. Sorry.
Am I boring you?
I just realised there's lots of people here who come to hear you speak, and I'm sure they've got questions. Quite bright. I can see you. Does anyone have a question at all? Yeah.
Here?
And we have an extra mic somewhere.
There's someone running to you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there about not having a very good memory, yet when you go out and you have a plan for doing a project, you kind of just go for it and you let it take you wherever it wants to take you. I kind of do a similar thing myself, and my family kind of thought I was a bit crazy. They said I was like Ulysses, James Joyce kind of thing, where it was just a bit, they just didn't understand it. So has there been times in the past for you that either family or friends or colleagues or something just thought that the journey you were going on, either for that project or for other projects, was just, they just didn't understand it?
Sorry, I feel I'm struggling. It's sorry about my mood here. I'm feeling morose and not very articulate right now. I think my family, I think they're fairly understanding of it. I mean, this is another thing to clear up, is that I was never as a teenager, I didn't hop on trains and go across the country, and I was never a bohemian type. So I'm actually quite the responsible adult type person. Sort of has a regular, and in fact, to this day, I keep very regular hours at my studio, and sort of end at 5, and I think, and that's this weird contradiction, and that's why. I'm sort of wary of trying to project this image of myself, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable watching a film, because it looks like an image of myself, and I'm really pretty normal.
Do you think that's your form of escapism then, is to get out and have a project?
Yeah, because deep down I'm not normal, and neither are you. It's true of almost all of us, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Yep, just over here. I'm curious about in this particular project that the film covered, the people that you're going to speak with and visit are seen, I think, in America as sort of the most unapproachable, most heavily armed, most terrifying people you would want to go visit or approach. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about just the logistics of approaching them or getting them to speak with you or let you into their environment.
Yeah, it's no big deal. And I'm really fascinated about that question here in Belfast, this issue of fear. So I did a project in Bogota, and when we adopted my daughter, and I was constantly told, oh, be careful, be careful. And I originally had this driver who took me around, and was really nervous if I got out of the car in certain areas, and then eventually kind of figured out where I was okay and not, and went out on my own. And people were really nervous, super friendly, welcoming. I'd go into people's houses, and but they'd be careful pulling out your camera. And I'm sure there's totally legitimate fears, reasons for concern. And I really thought about this the other day, because I took this black taxi tour, And, you know, and of course I see the bonfire. I wasn't photographing, I was just looking. And there were a few teenagers hanging out. And the driver said, "Don't get out." I'm like, there's a teenager. Like, what's the big concern? It doesn't look that threatening at all. And the question is it a threatening situation or is it not? Is it a culture of fear that exists? And that, you know, that happens all over the place, you know, in the U.S. too. And sometimes there are reasons to be afraid. I don't know, but in this case, yeah, never was there anything that scary except the guy did the singing. Only because when I first met him, you know, I was alone and he like barricaded the door when I was inside, which is concerning. But this is the thing, that most people are really, you know, if you have a real encounter with them, are just fine.
Yeah, that would be scary. I just have another question actually, just come to mind. The film is almost like a companion piece to the book. There are some nice static shots of things that are photographs, you know, in the book as well. When the guys, Laura and Arno, came on board, is that something you did envisioned?
Oh my God, no. I mean, I was not for the idea originally. They were, but then I met them, and they're, you know, it's just two of them, so it's small, super sweet, young. I knew they wouldn't push me around, and I didn't know. And then I had this idea that it would liberate me in some ways from having to tell the story, because sometimes there are really great stories, really interesting people, but I don't want to have to go through all the mechanics of explaining their stories. And so in many cases, there's just one picture or just a picture of a room of one of these people that I photographed. So I don't have to get all that backstory in there, and they took care of it. And yeah, it's quite interesting, the relationship between the film and the book. And then the book had this strange life where it like barely exists. So for complicated reasons with the publisher, it like virtually never came out. There's like only like 800 copies or something that are out in the world. And so the film is out in the world. And it's strange. It's somehow connected to what the whole thing is about, hiding and whatnot. So you have to like go hunt for the book.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? Come on.
Oh, my dreariness is destroying the mood.
Did you find your key?
I didn't at the time, you know, so I really, you know, that's an important thing. I mean, it's kind of clear that it's clear that I want a cave, but I also made this work at a point when I was getting very frustrated with photography. And for a big chunk of it, I barely took pictures. And I had this idea of buying this cave and doing something sculptural or performative or something. And then the economy collapsed, and it was just like too expensive to buy land, and I gave up on that. A friend of mine makes models, and he built this very detailed diorama of a tree house and a cave underneath, and that became the standing, because I realized I could just kind of look at that and possess it in a way. So that exists, and then, yeah, I might have a cave somewhere.
Okay, someone else wants, there you go.
No.
Hello. Yep.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the movie there is one man who you said you couldn't solve the photographic problem of taking a picture of him because it was overwhelming. Can you say a bit more about that situation and what your thought process were and whether you tried or not, and yeah, basically what happened? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, you know, just watching it. It has been a while since I've seen the movie, I realized, and like I've really grayed a lot since then. And that, there is a picture, and he's really far away. And I never made a good picture of him. And it's a great example of like, a photograph is different than a story. And he was such an amazing guy. In the movie, it's so much better at capturing the spirit than I ever could in a photograph. You just never capture that. I said in class today that if I had, in an ideal situation, I would just never talk to people. I would just take their picture, because that's the experience of looking at the picture on the wall. And it's kind of confirmed that in some ways, because all the talk, the more compelling he becomes, the less I'm able to capture that in the photograph in some ways. Which is connected to my frustration with photography at the time of the making of this work.
Do you feel that when that happens, the interaction between yourself and the subject is demystifying the situation? So, whereas the photograph is trying to capture.
Yes, yeah. No, interaction does. Yeah, a photograph is like a springboard for the imagination. I mean, you see it and you imagine. So, the picture of the guy with the swastika on his arm in the little pond is completely mysterious as a photograph, and you have this other experience when you learn about him. But what's really interesting is that the movie itself is a fabrication of sorts. You know, like, the movie is made over time. You see, like, my hair is different lengths, but it's edited not in sequence, and I know how it's shaping the truth of the situation as well. So it's, but the thing I like about photography is its mystery in so many ways. Yeah. Just a little back here.
But is it the experiences that drive you from one section to the next, or one connection to the next, or is it the photograph you make? Do you know what I mean? So is it the photograph that drives you, or is it the experience that drives you?
Good question. When I first got interested in art, I did like earthworks art, sort of in the spirit of like Richard Long, people like that, and I like the idea that the photograph is just this document that refers to the experience, and I think at the time of this Broken Manual, I really felt that way, that I cared less about the photographs, and it could just be a marker of the experience. I've kind of come around since that time, and I've gotten much more interested in making pictures again and making, really compelling pictures. So it's a mix. It's like an analogy for photography is hunting, and you would never be crawling, through the brush and getting up at 4 a.m. and having these experiences if it weren't for the thrill of the kill in some ways, but the actual thing, the trophy, is sort of less satisfying. The thing that you put on the wall is less satisfying. That was positive. There we go.
Could you talk a little bit about how poetry relates to your work, and how you said it was more like a poem than an essay? In what ways? How the poem used to construct it, and what is used to construct something?
Yeah. So you know, I was saying about a photograph being this kind of springboard for the imagination, and I feel like a photograph does the same thing. Like this film, they sort of have to get me from point A to point B in some ways. They have to explain, and sometimes it's not totally clear. I always wonder like how much people are realizing. Like, do you realize that was a realtor that I was walking around with at that one point? I'm not sure if that's totally clear. There's a realtor who's trying to show me his property with a cave, and they kind of have to. The filmmakers take a shot of a realty sign, and they're trying to like make it clear what's happening. And as a photographer, I don't have to do that. I can leave these huge gaps, allowing people to sort of invent the story. And that seems closer to poetry for me. And allowing kind of free association to take place. And it's sort of hard to talk about that after seeing the film, but if you see the photographs in an exhibition hanging off each other, it ideally does that. So like in the example of that white cave, the picture that you have there is just these hangers and this white wall. And so you can fabricate what that cave is. If that makes sense. Yeah.
And there's just one over here.
What kind of photography inspired you? Like, what do you like to look at?
I guess it depends on where I'm at in my process as well. I have to look at. I mean, generally it's quite straight photography. Often, for a long time it was kind of like press photography. I mean, it's really. I get more and more excited about Ouija and sort of that era of like just out covering the world as it is, and the social fabric of the world. I mean, that's the odd thing about watching this film is that I've most recently done a project that's all about interacting with society and community life and so forth. And so I'm excited by those kinds of pictures. Last week, I gave a lecture in conjunction with this festival, and before me, the night before, was the photographer Larry Fink. I don't know how many of you know him, but very much a photographer of social life, and his photographs are just fantastic. I'm just kind of digging into the social, and I guess I've been more in that phase of life.
In hearing you talk about your work, sometimes you seem like almost frustrated having to explain it, and I find some photographic work frustrating because I feel like there's not an important emphasis on the photography because somebody just has an idea. Do you ever get that yourself? I don't get interested by stuff that's overly intellectual. I just like something that looks good and I can make my own mind up about it. Do you feel like that with your work sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I do like to have a conceptual backbone to the thing, so I don't want to disregard that. But I don't want to write essays and essays about it. I mean, I'm really fascinated with this phenomenon that I've heard a couple times here about there being PhDs in practical photography here, which I've heard that it maybe exists in the US, but it seems sort of impossible to imagine that there's that much to talk about. It's not that complicated, it's...
Thanks very much.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
Just go ahead.
Oh, okay.
No,
now, maybe so other people can hear you. Here she comes.
Just kind of moving away from this project a bit, congratulations on Songbook, which was really fantastic in my opinion. It's quite different to what you've done before. I mean, where did Songbook come from, or how did it evolve to come out, now, as it were?
Yeah, so after making this work, and as I said, I was kind of frustrated with photography, and I felt sort of self-indulgent after a while. I see this spectrum of sort of inward-looking and outward-looking, and I felt like I looked inward for too long, and kind of just got nauseated by that, and needed to push outward. And it was a really healthy move. And just going out in the world and I had this experience again. I mean, I feel like I'm going to just keep bouncing back and forth in the spectrum, but just a month ago, I did this small little project in far northern Alaska, and it really reminded me of Book Emmanuel, and I was like going to that inward place. And then immediately after, I did this project in conjunction with this social practice program in Oregon, where we were forced to engage with the community. And I ended up doing this project with this 8-year-old black girl. And, it was not self-portraiture. All these people, I'm like looking at myself. And in this case, you remember there's like other people with other lives, and that's okay, that's interesting too. And it forces you outside of yourself, and that's a good thing. Kind of swirling in the background of all of this for me, is Robert Frank. And, Robert Frank went from the Americans to this very painful internal work and hiding out in Nova Scotia. And I love that work, but I kind of also want Robert Frank to go back out in the world. Yeah.
Will you become a street photographer?
A street photographer? No, I'm terrible at that. Yeah, no, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at this is the conceptual part of me, is that I do need a concept. I do need to hold on to ideas. I can't just shoot willy-nilly. It just doesn't work for me.
I think we've just got time for one more question, if anyone has just a final question.
Way in the back.
Hello. I was wondering, how did you move from person to person? Did you go on a recommendation of the person before, or did you just drive around until you found them, or are they big characters that everyone knows about?
That's a good question. Of course, there's many, many things in between these people that you see here. And some of them are like, you'll see them quickly, they'll cut away through different encounters. No, some, the fellow, the guy who I'm on the swing set with, talking about the caves with, he's a guy I met online, because he was on these online forums about converting buses into living places, and I kind of met him that way. Other people I met just through driving around. Just you go on a back road and you just keep following the furthest back roads you can find, and you end up somewhere. So they're not known, but they're not totally off the face of the earth either. But that, again, that's the mythology about it. So, do you guys all know the Unabomber? Yeah. So like the Unabomber, sort of the most famous recluse, he would ride his bike into town. He was kind of a known character. So very, very uncommon that someone is just totally off the grid completely. So you can, it's not that hard to find. I'm sure you have them around here as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Um,
All right.